What I learned is successful people are willing to do what unsuccessful people are not. So I'm successful because I'm willing to do what you ain't willing to do. I'm willing to get up early. I'm willing to stay late. I'm willing to do that over again. And when I don't feel like doing it, I get up and I do it again. And that difference between me and you. I'm gonna keep going when I don't feel like going. You wanna go as long as it's comfortable and convenient. But then you wonder why you ain't got what I got. You ain't going where I'm going.
Welcome to Closing the Gap Podcast, The Truth About Wealth. I am rolling solo today, your host, Eddie Richardson, in the absence of Mr. Hamilton. And like he would always say, you know, he's blessed and highly favored. And so we thank him for the opportunity to come to you today and on another righteous and holy episode. And today we're going to entitle this episode, Expanding Your Capacity. Expanding Your Capacity. Like always, Closing the Gap Podcast is sponsored by Hamilton Wealth Advisors. So we advise you to go to HamiltonWealthADV.com, set up your consultation with Mr. Hamilton and his staff to make sure that you have all of your personal wealth and planning put together. Mr. Hamilton has offices in Atlanta, Dallas, Huntsville, and here in Birmingham, Alabama. And Hamilton Wealth Advisors, your financial prosperity is our top priority. So let's go into the podcast today. Expanding your capacity. We want to give a baseline for this podcast today out of the text of 2 Kings chapter 6, verses 1 through 2. 2 Kings chapter 6, verses 1 through 2. The text says, in King James Version says, "Behold, now the place where we dwell with thee is too strait for us. Let us go and take thence every man a beam, and let us make a place there where we may dwell. And he answered, Go ye." In this text, we have Elisha in a meeting with the other prophets in the area, and they're meeting in their meeting place, and they realize that the place where they have been meeting has grown too small for them. They have observed that, you know, hey, it's the prophets are growing. The group of prophets are growing. Our ministry is growing. The work that we're doing is growing. And so our meeting place has to accommodate the growth that we also are having. On the last episode of the podcast, we talked about knowing your enough number. And this is something that we have to constantly evaluate, is taking a look at who we are, what we have, and doing an assessment of this. This is accountability to make sure that we align everything properly so that we can function correctly moving into our future. And this is where we find the prophets in this text dealing with Elisha is they say, hey, what we have has been good for us for a certain amount of time, but now we've outgrown this space. Financially, we must also take an assessment of ourselves. Where are you? Have you outgrown the plans that you've already had? How you've been functioning currently, is that still good for you today? Where is your capacity? Have you fulfilled your capacity? Have you grown? And is it time to build something more? That's why we come here every week, week in and week out, to try to express to you the need to take an evaluation, be accountable to yourself, be accountable for your finances, be accountable for your health, be accountable for your wealth and those that are around you, so that you can make sure that you have everything that you need to function for the future. The prophets realize that we need more. Place that we are is grown too small. So do you have faith to expand your finances? This is the question that you must ask yourself today. Do you have faith to expand your finances? Oftentimes, when we see things have gotten too small and we like to just stay comfortable because we don't like to make changes. And oftentimes the lack of change is what hinders us from getting to the place in which God desires for us to be and the place that we really want to be. Many of us don't want to stay in the same rut that we're in, the same place that we're in. We don't want to, stay in small places. We want things that are larger, and not just for the sense of having something that's bigger, just to say I have something that's big. But no, we've outgrown where we are. right? My bank account is outgrown the small amount of savings that the bank gives me. That 0.25, 0.5% or whatever the number that you may get from the savings account with your bank, that's too small. You have too much money in that account to just allow them to give you that small amount of money. That's why we have the opportunity and the availability for you to call Hamilton Wealth Advisors so that you can take those funds and put them in a place that they can grow in a greater way. This is the mindset of the prophets as they met with Elisha. They said, hey, it's time for us to grow. It's time for us to go. It's time for us to do something else. It's time for us to expand our capacity of where we are. So let's talk about capacity for a moment. Capacity is having an understanding of what I have and what I'm capable of doing with what I have. Capacity, your gas tank on your vehicle has a certain amount of gallons that it can take. Every vehicle has a different capacity. Every vehicle, based on what size it is and what the performance of that vehicle is, you have a recommended size tire, size rim for the vehicle. Every vehicle can't have a very small rim, and every vehicle can't take large rims. It's based on the size of your wheel well to the capacity of rim that your vehicle can take. Same thing when it comes to us and our finances is what type of capacity, what type of understanding do I have about myself and about my finances and about my faith in God? Have I limited myself far too long? And oftentimes we can say, yes, we have limited ourselves. Our capacity is actually bigger than what we think it is. But because we don't think that it is bigger, our thoughts end up leading us into a space of lack and having small-mindedness, right? So we don't grow. So our capacity, essentially our capacity is, what can we think? How can you visualize what you are able to do? Do you see your finances at a point that they can grow past where they are? Do you see yourself at a point that you can grow past where you are? Do you see the walls closing in where you've become limited and cannot expand? Well, that means it's time to go. It's time to grow. This is where we find ourselves in the text. The prophets have the capacity that, look, this place is too small. And they're not complaining, right? And oftentimes we think that if I'm not appreciative for where I am and just take things as they are, then I'm complaining, right? When people ask us oftentimes, how you doing today? We say, well, I won't complain. That's fine. We're not talking about complaining, but when you recognize that there's an issue, recognizing and calling out the issue is not making a complaint. It's not negative. What it is it's taking an assessment. It's being accountable. It's showing that I'm fully aware of what is going on around me. All right. Every time you hear somebody talk about something isn't necessarily a complaint. Or let's frame it this way. It is a complaint, but every complaint is not necessarily negative, right? We are able to get change by making complaints, right? If you want something to change, you must let somebody know that there is a problem. When you go to a restaurant and your food is not correct, will you just accept it? Or will you make a complaint to the manager that, hey, look, my food is wrong and I need this to be redone, right? That's a positive complaint because you are critiquing your food. You paid for the food. You went to their restaurant because you like it or you wanted to try it. You're going to pay for the food. And so you want the food to at least look like and be cooked in the manner in which you asked the kitchen to do it. And if it comes out wrong, you need to tell your server that, look, this food is wrong. Or will you just sit there and eat it anyway? Right? Well, Oftentimes we do, because sometimes we think that that complaining is always negative. But no, when I make a complaint, that's when I'm able to get the change and receive what I actually pay for and receive what I'll just do unto me. This is awareness. And this is where we find the prophets in the text. They are fully aware of where they are. But oftentimes in our finances and in our faith with God, we become too small-minded. We become too small-minded. We believe that we can stay in financial smallness because we feel as though we are supposed to set limits on ourselves. I want you today to expand your capacity and remove the limitations that you have set on yourself. Your finances are not growing in the manner in which you desire them to grow is because you've set a limitation on yourself. And through your limitations, you've told yourself that I can't, or I don't deserve, right? Or you may not have told yourself in those terms, but by saying that, well, I'm fine where I am, you've basically told yourself that I can't. Well, I'm doing all right. I got mine. Look at me. I'm doing well. Well, you could be doing better. And that's why we want you to take a full accountability and assessment of where your finances are, and do you have the room to grow them? And I guarantee you that you do have room to grow your finances, grow your faith, and become bigger. Expand your capacity. You don't have to stay limited where you are. Oftentimes, we limit ourselves because this is a false sense of humility. We feel as though if I don't complain, if I don't say anything about what's going on, then I'm actually staying humble. But this is a pseudo humility that we trick ourselves into just sitting where we are, being content with what we have, not realizing that God has greater growth in store for us. You can grow your finances. You can have a greater retirement. You can have a greater walk and friendship with your neighbors, with your family. You can expand your capacity if you are willing to. Stop putting limits on yourself. Stop putting a cap on yourself. God can do exceedingly and abundantly above all you can ask or think. But the problem is we don't think large enough, nor do we ask for more, because we want to try to say that we are being humble, but that is not really being humble. True humility is the willingness to ask. Humility is that I realize where I can get some help, and I realize that I need some help, and I'm willing to go to the place, the person that can give me the help that I need, and I'm willing to say, hey, I need you in this moment. This is where our capacity can expand by humbling ourselves to say, hey, I don't have what I could have, but I'm willing to grow to become and to receive what it is that I could possibly have. So I'm willing to call Hamilton Wealth Advisors and say, look, Mr. Hamilton, and I don't have what I think I should have. I'm not doing what I think I should do. I should have more in my retirement account. I should have more in my 401k. I should have more, in my bank account right now. I need to do more to build the generational wealth, not only for me, but for my children and for my children's children. I desire more. I want to expand my capacity so that they don't have to do what I had to do, so that they can build upon that and they can extend to their families. So I'm humbling myself to ask for help so that I can grow. This is where we need to rid ourselves of the confusion, is that humility allows us to release ourselves from limitations. Humility releases us from from limitations. Also, the other thing that causes us to stay in a lack mindset and not expand our capacity is we confuse stagnation with contentment. We confuse stagnation with contentment. Contentment says that I realize who I am, I realize what I must do, and I'm willing to do that. Contentment does not mean that I won't grow. Contentment just says that I realize that I am who I am and I'm doing the things that I need to do, but I can also grow in this same space myself as a barber, as a pastor. Let's go on to barbering. So I can be content with being a barber, but I can also stagnate myself as a barber if I don't allow myself to learn the new methods and modes of barbering that are going on today. I can be content with being a barber, but I can stagnate my barbering growth by not allowing myself to know the new tools that are in the business, to know the new methods of taking care of hair and cutting hair, to know the new ways that skincare is done, right? Things evolve, and being content with being a barber does not mean I need to stagnate my business. And oftentimes what happens with us, we have small-mindedness because we confuse contentment with stagnation. We stagnate our growth in the business that we're doing. And so what we end up doing is we feel as though sometimes that growth means we need to go do something different. No, growth is not doing something different. Growth is being who I am and having a full understanding of what it is that I do and allowing God to expand my capacity in the same vein of what it is that I'm doing. You don't have to change jobs in order to grow your finances. You just need to have a plan and a budget to manage your finances better. This is where contentment is. That's what contentment is understanding that I have this job. This job pays me well. I may not have the finances. My finances are not growing like they need to, but I do make enough money that I can fulfill my enough number of where I want to be in retirement and where I want to be and for the next generations of my family to be. So I understand that I can be content there, but I can grow staying in that same lane. Let's take it here. Same lane. You're in a vehicle. You're driving in a lane. You can drive 55 miles per hour or you can drive 65 miles per hour. You don't have to change lanes nor change vehicles. All you have to do is accelerate. So when we're talking about the difference between contentment and stagnation is understanding I'm in this lane and I'm in this vehicle, and I'm content with there, but I can grow, I can expand my capacity by just accelerating myself, moving more instead of staying in one place. All right. Stagnation just pulls off to the side of the road, doesn't want to move, says, hey, I have the car. I'm moving, I'm sitting here and I'm all right there. Right. So don't confuse contentment and stagnation. Contentment continues to move. Stagnation stays still. The other thing that we'll say about this as well, about financial small-mindedness, is we confuse faith and passivity. We confuse faith and passivity. Faith is not a passive thing. Passivity says that I'm going to stay where I am and I don't believe that I can change. But faith says that I believe that God has something more in store. Faith says that I can grow into being something more. And that was the mindset, or is the mindset, that we find in 2 Kings chapter 6 verses 1 and 2 is the prophet said that, look, we have faith that we can grow. And we're going to extend on this conversation when we come back after this break. Welcome back to Closing the Gap Podcast, Truth About Wealth. I am the only host today, Mr. Eddie Richardson, in the absence of our owner and of Hamilton Wealth Advisors, Mr. Wilbert Hamilton. And we want to remind you right now again, if you have not done so, make sure that you contact Mr. Hamilton and his crew at Hamilton Wealth Advisors. Like we said, they have offices in Atlanta, Dallas, Birmingham, Huntsville, and your financial prosperity is their top priority. Give them a call today because they are committed to transparency, integrity, and they tailor make portfolios that fit you and your desires and what it is that you want done in your family. They operate as fiduciaries, placing your interests front and center. So make sure that you call Hamilton Wealth Advisors. Visit the website at hamiltonwealthadv.com and set up your consultation today. So today on the Closing Gap Podcast, the title of our podcast today is Expanding Your Capacity. And we closed out talking about faith and how we confuse faith and passivity, right? Oftentimes we are passive, thinking that, okay, well, I'm being humble, I don't need much. And so therefore we lack the growth. But faith says that I can move past where I am. Faith says that God has something more for me. Faith says that although I am in this space that I am, I can build a new space. That's where we find our prophets in the text that centers our podcast today of 2 Kings chapter 6 verses 1 and 2. 2 Kings chapter 6 verses 1 and 2. The prophets told Elisha, this place is too small for us. Let us go and every man take a beam and let's build a new place. And Elisha said, look, that's cool. Let's go ahead and do it. Let's take care of that, right? Let's grow. They had faith. They weren't passive and just sat back and said that, well, since we do have Elisha meeting here with us, we're just going to stay here in this room, even though we know it's too small. No, they were aware. They recognized that they could grow. They recognized that they could grow. So I want to ask you, have you taken the time to evaluate yourself to recognize where your capacity can expand, where you can grow? This is the opportunity today to do an assessment of yourself, to realize and take a check on where can I grow? Where does God have places for me to expand my capacity financially and expand my faith? Because before our finances can grow, our faith must grow first. Biblically, it says if you have the faith the size of a mustard seed, you can move mountains. And oftentimes, because we look at mountains as something that's large and a mustard seed as being small, and Jesus teaching that lesson that if I have that small amount of faith, I can move something that big. Well, let me challenge you and say, look, what if your faith was the size of an avocado seed? How big of a mountain or how many mountains could you move if your faith was bigger? All right. Don't get stuck on the bare minimum. Jesus was given an example of the bare minimum of faith that it took to do big things. So imagine if your faith is larger, how much larger your capacity would expand if your faith expands. If your faith expands and your trust in God expands, your finances can grow as well. So the question that you need to ask yourself, is my income too small for my calling? All right. Where God has called me to, am I actually, do I have enough income to fulfill the calling that God has for me? All right. You may know or not know what God wants you to do, but you become satisfied. You become stagnant with your income. And then you're wondering why you're not able to do what God is calling you to do. Well, it's because you're not allowing yourself your capacity to expand. You're not allowing your faith to grow. Also, the other question I want you to consider about your finances is a check that you need to check with yourself is my emergency fund too small for everything that I'm responsible for? You know, on the base level, we like to, get, $1,000, $3,000. And those are some base amounts that, sometimes financial advisors will tell you to have as an emergency fund. But as your capacity expands, your emergency fund must expand to match your capacity, right? So everything needs to grow in alignment. We need to remember alignment and accountability are the terms that we are flowing on this year at Closing the Gap Podcast. So does your emergency fund align with all of your financial responsibilities? All right. Also, you must check yourself on your financial literacy. Have you grown in your financial literacy enough to acquire the wealth that you pray for? Expanding your capacity says that as I pray for something, I must also prepare myself to receive what it is that I pray for. Expanding your capacity says that, yes, I may believe that God will give it to me, but am I preparing myself for what God is preparing to do for me? The prophets in the text understood that they need to do some work in order to have a bigger room to meet in. They were willing to go and every man go and cut down a beam to bring and build for the new room. This is the question for you. Are you willing to actually put in the work for what it is that you're praying for? It's easy to go and ask and then get in your room and pray and ask God, God, will you do this? God, will you do that? God, I need some more finances. God, I need you to do this for my life. And I believe that is possible. And you go and you quote 1,000 scriptures and you're able to almost quote the whole Bible by memory. But yet all of that quoting, you're not willing to put in any work, because the Bible says that faith without works is dead. Yes, we are saved by faith alone, but if you don't put in any work, how do we know that you actually have any faith? So you need, in order for your finances to grow in the manner in which you're praying for them to grow, you need to do some financial literacy. And if you are not willing to read and don't know where to go to get the financial literacy on your own, guess what? That's why we're here at Closing the Gap Podcast, is because we tell you week in and week out, put in the call to Hamilton Wealth Advisors, and they will help you become literate in financial matters that pertain to you and your family and what it is that you desire to do and how you desire to grow in your life. So you need to understand that you cannot expand in the places that you refuse to acknowledge you have outgrown. You can't expand in a place that you refuse to acknowledge that you have outgrown. They told Elisha, let's build something. Let's go make a place for this, right? They took ownership, and you must take ownership over everything that pertains to your life. You must take ownership of your faith. You must take ownership of every dime that you make. You must take ownership on the lack of the money that you don't make. And oftentimes that's somewhere that we must expand our capacity. Is we must take responsibility for what we don't have just as much as we take responsibility for what it is that we have. It's easy to say, I have this and I'm going to be responsible for it. But oftentimes what you have is not enough because you have not taken responsibility for the fact that you were supposed to go and do more than what you're already doing. See, you like to sit and stay stagnant and not move, but today we're pressing you to grow. We're pressing you to expand your capacity and realize that when you put a plan together and you take accountability, that God will bless the vision, that God will answer the prayers because you are taking the time to put in the work, because you believe, and that's where your faith comes in. But after your belief, you're willing to go and do the work. You're willing to move. You see, that's what happens when God will meet you when you are participating in the plan. God doesn't just want you to sit back and continue to pray, because faith is not just waiting on an inheritance. Faith is building an inheritance. That's what we're dealing with in the text of 2 Kings chapter 6. They were willing to go and cut down the wood that was necessary to build the new room. Faith is not waiting. Faith is moving. So faith is building an inheritance and not waiting on an inheritance. Faith is moving and not waiting on the government to give me what I need in my Social Security and in my retirement. But faith is calling Hamilton Wealth Advisors and sitting down and building a plan out with the finances that you have to make sure that you bless yourself and the generations that are coming behind you. Faith does not wait for an opportunity. Faith makes an opportunity. This is what we're saying when we're saying expand your capacity, is you build the inheritance. You don't wait for the government, but you also go out and you make your own opportunities. Faith says that I am not going to sit in this closed room, is what the prophet said, but I'm going to take the risk to go out by the river and cut down the wood that's necessary to build the room. Faith says that I'm willing to put in the work. Faith also says that I'm willing to gather the necessary resources to be able to do what it is that I want done. You're not waiting, you're going and building. So when you recognize that your bank account, your 401k, that's too small, right? Then you're willing to expand. You're willing to expand. You're willing to grow the capacity. What does this mean? Well, it means that I am intentional in the things that I do. I am intentional in the things that I do. Your income will not increase on your job if you are not intentional with acquiring new skills to show your employer that you are worth more than what you're currently earning. If you don't acquire new skills, you won't be able to grow. That's on your job. If you are an entrepreneur, if you don't acquire new skills, you will not be able to grow. You remember earlier I told you the difference between contentment and stagnation. This is the difference between contentment and stagnation. I'm on the job, but I'm willing to grow myself. I'm willing to get new skills, new certificates, or even a side business that still is in the same vein of what it is that I already do. Many of you are on your jobs right now, and you are making the company a lot of money. And you could actually have a consulting firm for yourself doing the same thing that you do on the job, and you could do it on the side. Now, you need to make sure that you check your contract to make sure that you don't have a non-compete clause, all right? And if you do have a non-compete clause, then you need to just make sure that you make yourself more valuable on the job, that you are able to increase your pay. Or also sometimes what it means that to increase income means that we need to just reduce some of our personal spending. A lot of times we can have more in our coffers if we just stop spending so much out. All right. So expanding our capacity is also expanding our mindset, expanding our growth. OK, our growth mindset, having a growth mindset. So also, we want to, in order to grow, we must be consistent in the things that we do. Oftentimes we don't invest consistently, and that's why our investment accounts are not growing in the manner in which they really need to grow, or they really could be growing. All right. So these are the beams that the prophets are going out to gather, and these are the beams that I want you to have in order to grow, is realize that expanding your capacity requires beams. It requires wood. It requires new structure. All right. So let's go into some of these beams that I need you to have. The first beam I need you to have is discipline. All right, I just talked about investing consistently, right? Investing consistently. It takes discipline to do. Right? And oftentimes our discipline wanes because we allow life to interfere with our discipline. Instead of dictating to life what we want done, we allow life to dictate to us what it would do. When I say this, what I'm saying is you will not, don't allow things on the job, family issues, government issues, tariffs, taxes, ICE in the cities. Don't allow these things to interrupt the plan that you need to keep, and staying disciplined with managing your finances, staying disciplined with having a good faith and trust in God and belief in God and prayer life and church life and worship life. Don't allow these things to interfere with you and what it is that you need to do, because you need to make sure to understand that God is number one and should stay number one in all things and in all ways. That our worship to God is primary. Our worship to God is number one. So in all that we do, we must keep God first. And when we keep God first, everything else can fall in order. And then what happens is God protects us and guides us and is able to keep the other things in order, because oftentimes why we lack discipline and things interfere with our lives is because we don't put God first. And then when we don't put God first, everything else comes and starts to try and run the race to take first place. Right? And while those things are running to take first place, we're sitting at the finishing line watching and waiting to see which part of our lives is going to take precedent now. Right? Instead of dictating and saying, look, there's already a winner in the race for my life, and that's God and God first. So everything else that's running a race in my life, I'm going to tell it what lane to get in. If you've ever watched Olympics or you've ran a running race around a track, each runner is assigned to a lane on the track. Right? Each runner is assigned a lane on the track. And this is where discipline comes in for us, is we must take the track of our lives and let everybody know what lane they need to get in every aspect of our life to be in a specific lane. And once we put every aspect of our life in a specific lane, then we have ordered our lives and we have discipline for ourselves. And once we order the lives and have discipline for ourselves, now I can expand my capacity, because now I see where everything is. I've labeled everything. I've lined everything out, and all aspects of my life, my finances are aligned correctly. And I've taken accountability that it's my responsibility to put everything in line. And now in the places that I need to grow, I'm able to expand myself to be able to do all the things that I've been praying for, all the things that I've been working for, all the things that I think that I deserve. And so now I can fulfill all of that. And guess what? God will bless that vision. God will participate in that vision. And God will help you to continue to expand wherever it is that you are. And we'll see you right back after this commercial. Welcome back to Closing the Gap Podcast, The Truth About Wealth. I am your host today, Mr. Eddie Richardson, in the absence of the owner of Hamilton Wealth Advisors, Mr. Wilbur Hamilton. But like always, this is sponsored by Hamilton Wealth Advisors. And so we advise you to get Hamilton Wealth Advisors as your wealth advisors. And remember that your financial prosperity is their top priority. They have offices in Atlanta, Dallas, Birmingham, and Huntsville. And so if you have not done so, please go to Hamilton Wealth ADV. That's short for advisors, HamiltonWealthAdvisors.com, HamiltonWealthADV.com. Set up your consultation to get the plan that you need for your life today, to make sure that you're able to build the lifestyle for you and the generations that coming behind you, so that you can fulfill the will for God in your life and fulfill what God's will is for your family as well. We also want to just take a moment to tell you as well, if you don't have a place to worship, a church home, we want to invite you down to New Grace Covenant Church down at 830 Briarwood Drive in Bessemer, Alabama. That's 830 Briarwood Drive in Bessemer, Alabama, New Grace Covenant Church. We start our worship services at 10:30 a.m. on Sunday morning. So look, we want you to have your finances in place by contacting Hamilton Wealth Advisors, and we want to help you in your faith walk with God through Jesus Christ down at New Grace Covenant Church, 830 Briarwood Drive. If you're traveling, that's on I-2059 and get off on that Alabama Adventure exit. Yes, indeed, and come and worship with us, and we're going to help you grow in Christ as we continue to grow in him as well. So back to our show. We're expanding our capacity today, right? We want to grow, and our baseline text is 2 Kings chapter 6, verses 1 through 2, where we find Elisha in discussion with the prophets. They are meeting in their room, and they realize that their room is too small. And so they need to grow. So they decide that they want to expand their capacity. And they say, Elisha, why don't you let us go down to the Jordan River and let us cut down some trees, cut down some beams so that we can build a new room for us to meet in. They are willing to expand their capacity. They're willing to expand their capacity, and they realize that expansion needs some new beams. And every person, every man that was there was said to go and get a new beam. Not one, not just the prophet, not the wealthiest person, but every one of them, each one of them was going to get a new beam. And so we need to realize that there is nobody that's going to save us in our economic and our faith situation here on earth. It's up to us. And as a community, wealth building begins with individual responsibility. It begins with individual responsibility. Each one of the persons, each one of the prophets in that room were responsible to go down and get a beam. And so that's what it is with each one of us, that us personally, each one of us personally, in order to build generational wealth for our family, each person in the family must take responsibility to take care of their finances correctly. In order for our communities, every community to grow financially, each family, each person in that community must take responsibility to manage their finances correctly. And that doesn't matter what community you're in, what city you're in, wherever it is, we're all dependent upon one another. The ecosystem and economic wealth of any city is dependent upon every citizen in that city having a budget and managing their finances well. And so the same thing happens within the church, is that the growth and the well-being of the church is dependent upon the spiritual faith of each congregant in that church. It helps to feed and take care of everybody that is there. And so in order for us to grow as a community of people, we must take personal responsibility to manage our own finances well. and realize that we are dependent upon one another, but not to have a dependency mindset. We are dependent upon one another, but in order to expand our capacity, we cannot have a dependency mindset. We must have a mindset that says, I have accountability and not dependability. That yes, I need you and you need me. But first and foremost, I must take care of the I in that statement. To take care of me, take care of I, to make sure that I can take care of we. So that's important, is that we must take care of ourselves in order to take care of one another. So I asked the question, have you made your will yet for your family? Do you have the right amount of life insurance to take care of yourself and the generations that come behind you? Do you have a good pathway and plan to eliminate the debt in your life? Have you set up an investment account to take care of yourself? And what do you own? Do you own a home, land, or any type of collateral that builds wealth that can be passed down to the next generation? So when we talk about expanding our capacity, we must ask ourselves this question: what does generational wealth in my family look like in the next 10 and 20 years? What does generational wealth in my family look like over the next 10 to 20 years? And based on the answer to that question, whatever your answer is, I'm not going to try to give any of us an answer to that question personally, because that's something personal. But I will advise you that whatever your answer is, you need to make sure that you have a good wealth advisor that makes your financial prosperity top priority. And then you need to be in a faith group, a church that makes your faith and belief in God top priority as well. That's what we offer here at Closing the Gap Podcast. We offer Mr. Hamilton and his company as your wealth advisors, and I'll offer myself as your pastor to be at New Grace Covenant Church to assist you to grow and to make your faith walk in Christ and with God our top priority. And this is where the prophets also found themselves aligned, that they took personal responsibility to go out and build the beams. They took personal responsibility and had awareness and accountability to make sure that they needed to grow the room. But then they made sure that they had a spiritual alignment. They had the financial alignment, and talking to Elisha and saying that, grant us the will to go down and get the beams by the Jordan River. But then they also realized that Elisha was their spiritual leader. And so they asked for a spiritual covering. They knew that they were the ones that needed to do the work, but they also wanted their lead prophet to go there with them. And this is the same mindset that you need to have to expand your capacity with your finances, is to realize that, yes, you can educate yourself. Yes, you can do some of these things on your own, but you need to talk to a licensed, trained fiduciary when it comes to your finances. And that's what we offer in Hamilton Wealth Advisors, is to have the conversation and lay out a plan with somebody that has access to the tools that you don't have access, nor have you been trained to do. And in order for you to be successful, you need to stay content in doing the work where it is that you gain your income. And then allow someone like Mr. Hamilton and Hamilton Wealth Advisors to be the one to manage your finances and lay out the plan with the will, life insurance, and whatever your enough number is to grow your finances in the manner in which they need to be grown. Also, based on the text, they got spiritual covering from Elisha They didn't move without permission. They asked Elisha to go. They placed themselves accountable to somebody for a spiritual covering to stay in order. And when we talk about accountability and a spiritual covering and having order, we're talking about alignment. And you need a place to be aligned spiritually with. You need a place that you can have a conversation with your pastor, a place that a pastor will pray not only for you, but pray with you and pray over you and pray over your family, pray over your life, pray over your health, pray over your finances, and to ask God to continuously bestow his grace upon you so that you can grow and your capacity expands in the places it needs to grow. Financial expansion without spiritual grounding becomes pride. And we talked about humility earlier. And oftentimes, when we think that we can do it all on our own, we become prideful. And the scripture tells us that pride goes before the fall. And oftentimes our finances are failing and falling because we have too much pride to have a good spiritual grounding. We have too much pride to have a good financial grounding to allow someone to lead and guide us in managing our finances in the right way. We have too much pride to allow ourselves to let someone lead and guide us spiritually in the right way. And oftentimes that's why we will attend a church where we can't have a conversation with the pastor. We can't be accountable in a group with anybody. We just want to go and get our God for 30 to 90 minutes. And then we want to go home and live our lives and do whatever it is we want to do. We found ourselves, we think that we are content with God there, but really we've stagnated ourselves, stagnated the growth. We feel as though because I have the mustard seed of faith, and that's all I need. But I want to come to you today to tell you that God desires to expand your capacity. God wants you to be in a place with a pastor and with some people that will help you grow and understand that expansion under wise leaders becomes a generational legacy. Expansion under wise leadership becomes generational legacy. When you have somebody like Hamilton Wealth Advisors guiding you in your finances, that's how you're able to build a financial generational legacy. When you are a member of a church with a pastor that will pray with you, for you, and over you, then that is when you will be able to leave a spiritual generational legacy, not only for yourself, but for your children and your children's children. You will have a spiritual anointing and covering that will lead and guide you and your family long after you have left this earthly realm. And that's what we want for all of you. We want you to have a faith that extends past your life. We want you to have finances that extend past your physical life. This is what we're talking about expanding your capacity. So I want to ask you the question, who in your life, who speaks life over your financial decisions? Who helps pray for you and with you over the financial decision that you make in your life? Oftentimes, I dare say that most of us will say no one. And if that answer is no one, then I guarantee you that is why we can say that we don't have what we think we should have, because we have not equally yoked ourselves with a ministry, with a church, and with a financial advisor to manage our financial decisions in the manner in which they need to be done. Now ask yourself, who have I placed my faith accountable with? Who have I placed my finances accountable with? These are questions that you must ask yourself if you desire to expand your capacity. If you don't want to expand your capacity, then that's fine. then you don't have to ask yourself these questions, nor do you have to try to find an answer to these questions. Stay in the stagnant place if that's what you desire. But I desire for more for you. God desires more for you. God desires that you be blessed. God desires that you have prosperity. God desires that you live an abundant life. But have you laid out the goals? And if you have laid out the goals, are your goals aligned, financial goals aligned with your faith? And are your faith goals aligned with your finances? If you are able to answer these questions, then you are ready to expand your capacity. You are able to grow because you have a covering. You have a financial covering and you have a faith covering. And all of us need those things when we are striving to exist in this world. Why is that? Well, because this world presents clear and present danger each and every day that we walk in our lives. Where do I see that? Well, in the text, the prophets were getting ready to go to the Jordan River. And the Jordan River was not a convenient location. The Jordan River was a high-flowing river. As they went to the Jordan River, they could have very well been taken under at the Jordan River. They could drown in the Jordan River. We are in the Jordan River every day of our lives. We are in inconvenient situations in our lives. We have clear and present danger that is all around us each and every day. You have today with the, AI is here, but even before AI, there were people that were stealing identities, taking money out of bank accounts. All of these various things are happening. There are people that take your investments and don't give you the investments and are honest about the investments that you make in your life. We have all of these challenges that we face each and every day. There are clear and present spiritual evils that pervade this world that are trying to overtake you. They are trying to make you feel like you are less than, trying to make you feel like you are not a child of God, that you can't grow your capacity. And so in the midst of these dangers, we need to realize that growth costs. And if you don't have the covering that you need as you go to the Jordan River in this world, then you will end up losing out on everything that God has in store for you to gain in your faith and in your finances. So you need to make sure that you are covered in all that you do. That as you go into these inconvenient situations, you realize that it's going to take some work. It's going to take some work, and financial growth and faith growth costs some time. Sometimes it causes us to be uncomfortable. It causes us to get rid of our old habits, and it causes us not to seek social approval, because too many times we are seeking the approval of others instead of seeking the approval of God. And so therefore we find ourselves in places of lack. We find our places in staying in small rooms where we cannot grow and have not grown because we have not allowed ourselves to gain the covering financially nor faithfully that we need in order to grow and in order to go into the places that God desires us to do. So I want you to realize that you cannot stay in small spaces and pray for large results. You cannot stay in small spaces and pray for large results. See, when you pray for a large result, when you pray a prayer like the prayer of Jabez, you want God to enlarge your territory, enlarge your finances. Well, let me tell you, he will do it, but you got to be willing to get out of the small space. And that's going to take some accountability from you. It's going to take you aligning yourself correctly. And so the accountability that I want you to take is to identify this week a financial area that's been too small for you. I want you to identify a faith area that's been too small for you. And after you identify those things, I want you to submit those, write it down. I want you to submit it to God. And then I want you to contact Mr. Hamilton and Hamilton Wealth Advisors to get your faith, get your finances intact. And then I want you to visit us at New Grace Covenant Church at 830 Briarwood Drive to get your faith intact. And guess what? As we move out through 2026 and the rest of our lives, we're going to expand our capacity. God bless you and God keep you until the next episode.